here had asked me to say something about some of my remembrances of Srila Prabhupada. And let's see. I mean, first of all, Srila Prabhupada was so just compassionate and merciful. Just, I had gotten Prabhupada's books in 1970 from the library. And so for 3 years before because and those books didn't mention temple, I didn't know, I accepted Prabhupada as my guru, but I didn't know how to find him. I didn't know there was a temple. I didn't know any of that. So it took some time. And then even when I found out there was a temple, it took some time to go to the temple. The devotee that gave me Back to Godhead magazine, actually it was at an Indian grocery store. The owner of the grocery store, anyway, he's the one he had a stack of them from the devotees giving him. So he gave me, and he said, come to the temple on Sunday for the free feast. And he emphasized free feast. By then I had been, I had been for several years accepting Srila Prabhupada, and I thought, I don't need free food. So I would specifically go not on Sunday. I went on Saturday and the temple would be closed. Everybody was out distributing Prabhupada's books or out in Sankirtan. I'd knock on the door and nobody would be there. So it took me 3 years to actually join the temple. And I had that relationship with Prabhupada. I accepted him as my guru for 3 years. And yes, I had read other books before, and I had read like Vivekananda's book about Ramakrishna, and he was explaining how a light came out and entered into him, from his guru. So I was expecting when I see Srila Prabhupada, there'll be some very magical, mystical experience, because I had accepted Prabhupada for 3 years. Seemed like a long time. So I came to the temple, and devotees told me that Prabhupada was there in Los Angeles and I should come the next morning for Bhagavatam class. So I arrived a little bit late, and I was thinking, the class lasted longer. But when I came to the LA, it was the Los Angeles temple where the old temple room was. And it had an entry foyer, and it was just a small area, but the whole temple was standing room only. So when I came, I came to the foyer, and it was just devotees standing in front, and I couldn't see Prabhupada. But I'd come the day before, and I was like for several minutes trying to see him. And I thought, here I've come, and I was thinking some great mystic thing would happen. And I can't even see him. I'm not even able to see him, or he can't see me. And I was thinking he would recognize me. He would know me, because that internal relationship. But I came the day before, and a devotee had told me, when you enter the temple, you should offer obeisances. Bow down. So I remembered that. So I went on my knees and touched my head to the floor, and I prayed that, Krishna, please let me see my spiritual master. But instead of standing up, I sat up, and the people in front of me that were standing, one leans off to the left, one leans to the right. The next row, one leans over, the next row. It's like one by one, and they just leaned apart, and Prabhupada's looking straight at me. And I was expecting some, mystical thing that everyone would see, everyone would notice, but it was mystical for me. That Prabhupada was looking, and he had such a merciful, compassionate look on his face. His eyes were just like beaming out that mercy and compassion. And he gave his head a nod, and then he went on speaking. And from that, I understood, Prabhupada understood who I was. I was feeling like I was thinking, he'll stand up and, and say, you finally come. But he gave that nod, and I understood. He knew who I was. He was giving me that you have come, I had another experience similar with Prabhupada years later. It's kind of a long story, but I guess I'll explain it. It was, I had never told anyone this, and when I gave the first time I told it, it was just 4 or 5 years ago, and another godbrother, Shesha, GBC, he told me to go ahead and give it was Prabhupada's parents' day. He said, give my offering first, then he'll give his. And his was about how he didn't take, that whenever Prabhupada would look at him, he would look down, because he felt that Prabhupada knew his sinful background. He would just look down and so he said he never actually, just got that mercy of gazing with Srila Prabhupada. So when I gave it was similar, but it's going to take a little while. I was shy at that time. I was like, when someone would look direct eye contact, I would usually look down. And then I realized it was a problem at one point. And then I read that, because I was my service was designing the control systems to run the multimedia museums. And I had to work with people on a professional basis. And I would go, and I was noticing I would look down, and I wasn't giving eye-to-eye contact. And then I read in it said that if you're dealing with people on business, you should give eye-to-eye contact. You should, because from that you can read a person, you can tell the person. I thought, then I need to work on this. So the next day, a devotee is talking to me, one of my godbrothers, and I went to look down. I thought, no, I'm going to do eye-to-eye contact. And I looked directly at him, first time, and I'm getting butterflies because I wasn't used to it. So just godbrother. So the next couple of days later, I'm walking by, and he's standing there talking to some devotees, and he stopped me and he said, take Ameyatma for an example. When you talk to him, he gives you eye-to-eye contact. He said he doesn't just look away. He was the first devotee I did that with. And he was telling the other devotees to use me as an example. But he said, from that eye-to-eye contact, you can actually read a person. You can tell how they're... and you can actually communicate just by that eye-to-eye contact. And I thought, it was interesting because when Srila Prabhupada would come to LA, or sometimes we would go up to San Francisco for the Rath Yatra, the temples would be crowded. And it would be especially up close next to Prabhupada. So when the kirtan was going on, and then at the end, and Prabhupada would Jai Om Vishnupad, and everybody would head for obeisances, you're standing there shoulder to shoulder in the kirtan, and you got 1 square foot of property, land. And then all of a sudden, everybody is offering obeisances. And it's like you need a little bit more space. So I was noticing you go down and offer obeisances, and you're getting someone's foot on your head. Well, that's good. You're taking the dust of the devote. But then your foot is touching somebody's head. So I hesitated one day to see if there's enough room. And there was no room after everyone offered obeisances. So I just went on one knee, and I'm kneeling, and I was standing, and I was thinking, and I'm offering, Prabhupada's chanting the pranam, the Jai Om Vishnupad Padamangsa, and he's going on, and it takes about 3 minutes that Prabhupada chants. And in that time, I'm standing, and I'm thinking, and I looked around, nobody else is standing in the whole temple, just me. So I'm thinking, Prabhupada must think I'm a total nonsense or something. Then I thought, no, Prabhupada understood. But when I looked at Prabhupada, he's looking right at me while he's chanting. So, like Sesha said, I put my head down. And then I'd look up, and Prabhupada was still looking right at me. And this happened. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but it was happening a number of times. At the end of usually the Guru Puja, and Prabhupada would start chanting the Jai Om prayers, and there was no room. And I hesitated just because I didn't want to put my feet on somebody's head. So and a number of times I would be kneeling, and every time Prabhupada would be looking right at me. And every time I'd put my head down. So after we had this conversation, it was Guru Atma, my godbrother, and he was saying that, you can communicate with someone just by eye contact alone. Then I thought, I wonder what will happen if I don't look down. And I just take Prabhupada's mercy and accept his mercy and just accept that eye-to-eye contact. I was just wondering what will happen. I didn't do it on purpose, but the next time there was no room. So I was standing or kneeling, and I looked, and Prabhupada's looking right at me. I go to look down, I thought, no. I will take Prabhupada's mercy. 3 minutes, I've timed it on a tape. It takes about 3 minutes for Prabhupada to chant those prayers. And that whole time, Prabhupada did not look away. And I wanted to in one way because I felt embarrassed. And at one point, I felt like when you're a child and you have the staring contest, who's going to blink first? I was thinking, am I going to look away or Prabhupada? But then all I felt was what I felt when Prabhupada first looked at me that first day. Just mercy and compassion. It was just, that is what you could see in Prabhupada. It was just mercy and compassion. And he understood. I understood that he knew. And he started, as he was chanting those prayers and he was looking, I could just feel like he was telling me, come. It just felt like he was inviting me to come. And I thought, how come? But he meant, just come. Join with him. He's on his way to Krishna. He'll take me to Krishna. So that was a very personal experience that I had. And yes, I was the first one who looked down. After the end of the prayers, then I offered the Namo Vishnu Padaya, and I looked down. But Prabhupada did not. He actually stayed looking right at me. And I took that mercy. And, at first it felt odd, just to not, but then I could just see he was just giving mercy and compassion. So, anything else that But that mercy and compassion is there in his teachings. That's the most important thing. It's the most important aspect of the spiritual master. And you can have that relationship with Srila Prabhupada still. You just don't have to have his eyes looking. That was the extra benefit of having been in Prabhupada's association. I didn't have so much that Prabhupada and I had conversations, but my relation was within the heart. And the Chaitya Guru from within. And that was my relationship with Prabhupada most of the time. Externally, these things of him seeing me, looking at me a couple of times, but on a morning walk and things and in his room. And you asked about Prabhupada in his room, upstairs in his actual quarters, he had three main rooms. Well, one small room where his books were kept, his bedroom where his bed was, where he took rest, and his, I don't know exactly what you call it, his office, like where he'd do the translations and everyone would come and meet with him in that room. And there was a small altar there. So we were in his meeting room, and we brought up a model of because I'm working on we called it Fate Museum, the doll exhibit. Prabhupada called them doll museum exhibits, the dioramas depicting Krishna's pastimes. And I started as an artist with that project because I was starting to paint for Prabhupada's books. And then Bhardraja, who was in charge, Prabhupada sent him to India to learn to make these diorama exhibits. So like these Samsara Beka. This is one of the ones that we made, and Bhardraj painted the original painting for that. Bhardraj is the main artist of the BBT. He had just painted the books for a number of the paintings in the Bhagavad Gita. He painted the cover of the original Macmillan Gita. He painted, and all the paintings that he didn't paint, he did a lot of the sketches and other artists painted. So he was the main artist in BBT. Prabhupada sent him to India to learn to make these diorama exhibits. So when he came back, he came to Los Angeles. He was in New York when he left, and he came back to Los Angeles to make the first exhibit there. So when he came and we're making some of the first dolls, I asked, how are these exhibited? And he just said, we make a raised platform and we put a plaque in front that explains. I thought that was boring. I thought, just... So I grew up in Los Angeles, or Southern California, and that's the entertainment capital. Hollywood is there, and I had been to Disneyland so many times as growing up. So I thought, well, we should have a soundtrack. Anyway, I started adding all these things to it. I said a soundtrack with background music, give it some ambience. Then when Bhardwaj agreed to that, then I thought, well, then we should have a narrator speaking on the tape instead of a sign. Then I added, we're making Krishna Arjuna on the chariot. So I added, we should have voiceovers for Krishna so he can speak and Arjuna can speak. And then we can have lights that fade in and out. When Krishna speaks, the light fades on when Arjuna speaks. And then we wound up building this. Finally, when Bhardwaj accepted the idea, we designed the museum with 11 exhibits and 250 dimmer-controlled, computer-controlled lights. Special effects projectors, rear screen projection, all this. And we designed the whole museum, and then Prabhupada is coming, and we realized nobody asked Srila Prabhupada if he approved of all that. So we made this model of the museum, 4 foot by 4 foot, and took it up to Prabhupada's room, and it just had cutouts for the exhibits. So the first one was Srila Prabhupada in his room, and Radha Damodar and Vrindavan as he's translating the books. The next exhibit was Krishna Arjuna on the chariot, and then the Samsara diorama, and all these different exhibits. So Bhardwaj has explained, and Prabhupada, you asked about, Prabhupada, in that mood, he was just like a child in a candy shop is how I describe it. He was just so happy because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati asked for these exhibits. He started that in the 1930s. So this was a very dear project to Prabhupada. And he saw that we're finally making the first exhibits in America. And so he was just so happy to see. And he came over to the model and he said, so, where's the entrance? And it was in the old temple room, the one I was describing that had that foyer entrance. Because now in Los Angeles, the temple room is in the bigger hall, but before it was in the smaller. And so he said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, this is the old temple room, and the entrance is with the foyer here. And then Prabhupada went and he put his fingers on the model. He came in, and at the entrance, the wall goes off in an angle. You can go one way or the other. So the Prabhupada walked with these things. Oh, which way do I go? And Prabhupada said, oh, Prabhupada, this way. And Prabhupada's walking with these fingers. It just seemed so, he was kind of like a child at that point, and he was just walking with these fingers. And then Bhardwaj said, oh, the first exhibit is this way, Prabhupada. Prabhupada turned his hand so that his hand could see the exhibit. Then he came over and was looking. So he was doing like that. And it was anyway, it was just, for me, it was very, and then Bhardwaj explaining all these effects. He's explaining that the exhibits are dark and the lights fade up and the soundtrack comes on and all these things. Gets to Samsara diorama, there's rear projection screen and all these things. And then we get to the universal form. Bhardwaj saying 64, controlled lights and special effects projectors, rear screen projection, all these things. And Prabhupada did not said a word. He's smiling. So Bhardwaj finally asked, Prabhupada, we're having this meeting and we want to know if you approve of this. Ultimately, though, Prabhupada said one thing, it takes some explanation to explain, but he was very happy with it. But when he sat down, he said, I wanted this. He said, I wanted that you Western devotees would use your knowledge of modern technology and utilize it to preach and spread Bhagavat Dharma. And he said, if I didn't use the jet plane and the microphone, then they would be useless. So he approved of using the modern technology to to spread our Bhagavat philosophy. Even though even though our Bhagavat philosophy and Prabhupada was teaching simple living, I think, ultimately he did not want that everyone go and work in factories and make all of these things. Ultimately he wanted the simple living. But we will utilize what is there to preach and to spread this philosophy. Otherwise, he said it's useless. So I will end there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.